just to get us started, so books, you wrote one, which congratulations.
Thank you. I worked really hard on it.
Yeah, you did, which is awesome. I think, it does remind me, we live in a world where a lot of people buy books,
Yep.
But don't necessarily read them. Has that ever happened to you?
Well, I mean, this whole episode's on integrity, so I have to be honest. A vast majority of the books I've bought, that are sitting up in my office, I've never read.
So what do you think?
I've read a lot of books, though, but
Yeah.
there's one of them. I'll tell you the worst one. The one of them is it's like sermon classics from some of the Christian giants. It's this big book that has all these famous sermons. Yeah, well, it's like all these famous sermons from these like Christian classics.
Yeah.
I've never opened that book one time, and it's been sitting in my office for years.
Oh
People are
my
always
gosh.
like, wow, you really go back to the classics, huh? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a good reminder of maybe even if people don't read it. We said it last episode that if you buy it, it's for you.
Hey,
read
you
it,
buy
it's
the
for
book,
them.
it helps me out.
Yes.
You read it,
Yes.
it helps you out.
Yes.
It'll be fun.
Yes. No, we all have that. So, no, but I think people are going to not be able to put this one down. So I'm excited about that. But let's go ahead and dive in. Man, this one is going to be awesome. This is actually a foundational thing. This is integrity. This is in the book. It's the Seduced Saint,
Yep.
which I love. And so make sure and get the book. Read all about how Pastor Aaron outlined Joseph's story, and obviously it's a famous. If you're familiar with the Bible, you're very familiar with that story. But all things integrity. I feel like we've actually seen that. Again, it's since the beginning. We can read the Old Testament and see integrity issues. However, for leaders these days, it has actually shown itself to be the one foundational thing. If you don't get right, you lose it all.
It is the great disqualifier. A lack of integrity is the great disqualifier of leaders. I believe in restoration, but I also understand you can be restored to God and not restored to a platform because our world forgives people, but they never forget.
Yes.
And the problem with 2023 or 2024, whenever you're listening and watching this, is that we live in a world where everything is recorded forever. Whatever you put on the internet or whatever's on the internet is on the internet forever.
Yes.
Like your great grandkids are going to be able to Google you or whatever the company's going to be using that day. And your name really matters. And my whole thing is I am developing a reputation that my great grandkids are going to, like, I can't Google my great grandfather right now. Like, there's no details. I can't go to his Facebook page. I can't see who his MySpace friends were.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We can't do that.
No, for
Our
sure.
kids are going to be able to go back and see your very early Instagram feeds stuff.
Which is scary. Yeah. Which hopefully isn't scary, but
No, I remember your stuff. It was embarrassing.
right,
It was a lot of gym selfies.
No, not me. I'm not a gym. I lurk in the shadows. I don't like to put it out.
You really do. No, you're good at that. Mine probably were.
Yeah,
But
I do think this is a good point, though, because I feel like that if we live, and we're going to do some deep dives throughout this episode, but if we truly live with the beginning, with the end in mind, right, we'll change. But even, so earlier this year, one of the Radiant Sermons, a guest speaker, and he's one of our good friends. He did a great job. He referenced a former like saint of the faith, which did incredible things for God in certain parts of his life. However, if you were to look at his pedigree or his Wikipedia, or if you were to Google him, there's some people that would actually be a little taken back because of that person, because of the way they ended, because their integrity wasn't there. So I think what it does for me, and I'd love for you to expound on that, is integrity. You can actually have all of the greatness. I know even your parents getting saved in the church they got into, if you want to dig into that, like so many great things. However, one mess up actually changes the whole dynamic.
it takes years to climb the mountain of success and significance, and it only takes one dumb decision to tumble all the way back down.
Yeah.
And what I have seen is people who have charisma to take them to the top, but they don't have the character to keep them there. Your character matters. We live in a world that is so obsessed with reputation. And I would say this, if you take care of your character and your integrity, your reputation will take care of itself. So my strategy for this is I'm not going to do anything that I would not be comfortable for it to show up in front of our entire church or for it to show up in the newspaper the next day.
Wow.
Live with the end in mind. I refuse to fumble this one life that God's given me because of some desire or some impulse or some temptation, which we all have. We all have those moments. And you go, well, it's overwhelming for me. We all have those times that we are tempted. But Jesus says in your moments of temptation, I will give you a great escape. I will provide a way of escape. And I'm telling you, if you will be a person of prayer, if you'll be a person of taking integrity serious, God will provide you escape during those seasons. So let me give you the greatest lesson I ever learned to help me live a life of integrity. It's in the book, but it's a leadership lesson. I've preached on it before, and it's called the aharit. Now, the aharit is a Hebrew word that we see all throughout the Old Testament. And what it means that which comes after. So it means basically it's to the back. It's that which is after. So the aharit is the devil's primary tactic is to blind us from the aharit, the end result. The idea of it is that the devil wants you to think that relationship with that girl, those pictures you're sending online, the way you're spending your money, nobody is ever going to know. He's blinding you from the consequences of your aharit. Proverbs 5 or Proverbs 6, one of those is a big passage on adultery and affairs. And it says, the girl is there and she looks good and, she's coming on to you and it looks all great. And then it says this phrase, and then at the end, you will groan and you will grieve. Yeah. The enemy's tactic is to let you think there's no consequence for that.
Wow.
And that's what happens. I've dealt with so many pastors and leaders that they've sat with me and I've seen the frustration. I've seen the anguish on their face. And there's two things that come to mind when I do this. I sat down with a pastor recently who was having an affair with someone on his staff, and it was a disaster. And I had to sit down and I had to confront him. And the anguish and the tears and the grief, and he lost everything. He lost everything. And when I looked at him, I thought two thoughts, and I think these are important to know. One thought is he never saw this when he was sleeping with that girl.
Wow.
He never saw this pain in the midst of that pleasure.
Wow.
And let's be real. As good as that pleasure was, it's not worth this pain.
That's so good. Yeah,
and here's the second thought I thought of, okay? This is the big one. The second thought is I looked at, when I was sitting there, I go, Aaron, never forget what you're sitting there watching right now.
Wow.
Because just as easy as he did it, you can do it. And we all can. Integrity matters. So you've got to think. It's exactly what you said. Think of the end result. Think of the final consequence. Think about the fact that your kids are going to speak at your funeral one day and you don't want them to lie about you.
Yeah.
You want them to say, my dad, my mom was a person that was Christ-like, a person of character, a person. My dad had issues, but I'm telling you, I know what I'm going to say at his funeral one day. Hopefully it's a long time from now, but he had a lot of issues, but he was the real deal.
Wow.
And he kept getting back up every time he fell down.
Wow.
That's an integrity thing. So be a person that's the real deal. That's what integrity means. It means integer. It means whole number. It means I'm the real deal. Not one group here, one group here, one group here. I'm not split. No, I'm one person. I'm the real deal.
And I think that's probably the struggle of our day because we are so public. Even we're especially leaders listening, regardless of the size team you lead, regardless of the size business or church. It's a very public ministry that's more, there's more awareness than there ever has been. And I think you can, what I like that you've done is you've allowed that to really put the fear of God in you. Instead of, isolating, you've gone the opposite. I know you and Katie you're very much accountable to Katie, your wife. You've got people speaking into your life, and regardless of what your position is, whether you're the lead pastor of a large church or if you're an early entry level team member, like this is something, and I would love for you to expound on this. This isn't something that you adopted this year because of your pastor's friends falling. This has been something that you've been cultivating for decades.
I remember being a youth pastor, and there was a kid in my youth group who was training to be in ministry. He was probably 19 years old at the time. And I took him to New Orleans. And we were, I was preaching at a church, Nolans. We were teaching at a church. And I'll never forget, we went to Subway and we were in line and he ordered a water and to drink. And I thought, not a big deal. And he goes to the machine and he pushes it on the Sprite. And so I pulled him aside and I go, buddy, what do you think you're doing? He goes, oh my gosh, do you know how much this actually cost them? It's pennies. And I knew how much I worked at McDonald's. We talked about the last session.
Yeah.
I know what it cost them. I said, I don't care what it cost them. I said, how much does it cost? Oh, it's $1.40 and I don't want to pay $1.40 for the drink or whatever. So your integrity is worth $1.40.
Wow.
That's how cheap you are. You're willing to give up because people think integrity, they think I'm not going to go and sleep around with somebody else.
Correct. Yep.
That's the extreme integrity cracks. The reality is big cracks, big foundational issues are normally those small little are started by those small little cracks in your character. And it's the cheating on taxes. It's I'm swiping the card for things that I shouldn't be swiping for. It's the small things make the big difference.
Yeah.
So integrity is not me now that I have a big church and we have a big budget and I'm on social media and I want to make sure I look good for people. No, integrity was years ago going, if I order water, I'm going to get water.
Yeah.
Because that matters.
Yes. And, I think it's similar to money. Well, actually, there's a lot of integrity with money. But the idea of exactly what you're saying, it's the heart. And really, it's a principle of the scripture of how we handle something. You mentioned this in a previous episode that I want to kind of dig into a little with David's story of Bathsheba, the private sin that was exposed, but also the private success that's exposed.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing with integrity. It's like, and it's not to go so, there's more podcasts in the future where we could dive deeper into this, but really briefly to overview, it's the gentleman that might have had a moral failure. It probably was the water versus the Sprite. It's like the enemy, the scriptures actually tell us that he crouches like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. And in time where and he looks for the opportune time. And so, of course, he's not going to expose the water issue.
Yes.
He's going to let that build until he can expose something larger.
A few years back, there's a condominium in Sunrise, Florida. It's by Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
Condominium was, 15, 20 stories tall. It was built 40 years ago, but they used cheap material for it. And they did not, whatever the metal is and reinforce it correctly. And it didn't break immediately, but eventually because it wasn't reinforced correctly, because they went cheap, they did something underneath the surface that they thought nobody will ever know. Well, the reality is, and y'all know the story, that the pool eventually fell into the parking garage. When it fell into the parking garage, it collapsed the condominium. This is 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's asleep, and it pancaked on top of each other, and all the people died.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And it didn't happen immediately. Your failure, and when you see a moral failure, when you see somebody cheating on their spouse, when you see somebody that gets put in jail for money laundering, none of that happened overnight. It was daily cracks in the system. It was a little bit here, a little bit there that they thought nobody will ever know. And that's the enemy's lie to us, is nobody will ever know. We were joking even before we got on this podcast today, before we started filming, about I didn't even know what OnlyFans was until a few months ago. Someone told me this thing is all these people are making all this money on OnlyFans. I'm like, oh man, what are they doing? They're like, oh man, you can go on there and they have their own channel and you get their private content. Well, I didn't realize their private content is private content.
Oh my God.
I mean, now again, I've never been on OnlyFans ever, just so you understand.
Yes.
And I don't have my own private air information. This is weird, but you got the idea.
Not selling any feet pics or anything?
No. There's no feet pics. No. If you want to get more information about the unfair advantage, go to Aaron Burke's OnlyFans site. No, that doesn't exist, by the way. The idea of it is I realize there's a whole world that's trapped in private sin that they think nobody will know about.
Yeah.
The world will know about it. You have two options. You can expose it to a pastor, to a confidential person in your life. You can get honest with them, or God will expose it, and you won't like it when God exposes it. Because God exposes it, because his goal for you, and I want you to get this, his goal for you is not ministry. His goal for you is Christ likeness.
That's really good.
So if you go, well, if he reveals this, it'll remove my ministry. His goal is not your ministry.
Wow.
His goal is that you become more like Christ. So the way that he refines you is he has to expose our sin so that we can get better. So many times, and I hope you get this, many times he will sacrifice your ministry so that you can become more like Christ. And that is scary to me. Now, I think you can have both of them. I think you can become more like Christ and have a great ministry. But I tell people when they get exposed for their sin and they lose everything, I tell them, I say, because ministry's never been the goal. Being like Christ is the goal. And Jesus and the Holy Spirit will do everything possible to make us more like Christ, including exposing our hidden sins. So integrity matters. Let me just say this, because I don't want people to listen to this like depressed, because they're like, oh, because everybody's got something that they're struggling with personally. So my two challenges for people is get honest and get help. Get honest, get help. Get honest. Find one or two people that you can be honest with. Some of that might be a counselor. Some of it might be your spouse. One person to be honest with, and then get help. There's help for whatever you're going through right now.
Absolutely. And not to shift gears too far, but maybe making it practical for those leaders out there that are leading teams. And I know maybe in the business world there's some nuances that are different, but especially for our pastors friends, we're probably looked at it a little bit more on the conservative side of some of these things. Which I personally, I know we've caught flack in the past, but I'm a fan of it, because I think what can be termed as legalism is actually safeguards. And so actually some of our staff, this happened just a couple weeks ago. We have a newer staff member who's a male, and his department works closely with another department that the department head is a female. And they had an issue with a vehicle that they were trying to get some stuff moved, and he's like, well, let's just hop in the car, and totally like innocent. There was nothing there, and the woman goes, well, no, we're both married. We can't ride in the car together. Which simple things like that would seem foreign to a lot of people. But it's one of those safeguards where there was probably not even a motive. There was no intention. However, we're going to go to the extreme of protecting our people of things like not riding in the car together with the opposite sex. It's Billy Graham who said, hey, I'm not going to jump into an elevator with anyone of the opposite sex. Again, some things that historically are now becoming from the perspective of legalism and old school and very conservative, they are now that doesn't deal with the heart issue, which is another topic. However, on at least the side of protecting yourself, like putting those types of safeguards in place. One of our campus pastors, I met him for a one-on-one earlier this year, and it was at a Starbucks. And one of his staff, usually they work out of a Starbucks close to their campus, and there's usually several of them there. I happened to show up when it was just him and one of the females on his team. Now, obviously, it's in the public Starbucks and all of that stuff, but it was a conversation I had, and he had a really great answer. Oh, this, and this. It was very transparent. However, those are the types of things that we're going to ask questions about. What you mentioned about the water and the Sprite, it's like, as leaders, ourselves, we have to like reflect on ourselves, but we also have to, those are the crucial conversations. If we see it, we need to say it, and we're going to create culture with that, and we're going to protect our people. People don't know what they don't know.
They don't know. And I know this will get crucified on social media. I get it, because I follow all the accounts online, and they hate the Billy Graham rule. They hate that. It's demeaning to women and women. Listen, I'm not against that. I'm not against women in leadership. Women, I mean, they should be and given every opportunity and everything. My thing is I don't want to give anybody the opportunity to accuse me.
Yeah. So
if you're never in this scenario, I trust myself. I think I'm very healthy. I trust my leaders around me. But my thing is, I just want to be in a place where I never give anybody opportunity to accuse me. One accusation takes people down.
Yeah.
So the Bible says be above reproach. That's how we live. We live above reproach. A phrase that we use with our staff is that others can, I won't.
Yeah.
Others can, I won't. So others can do that. Others can go watch that movie.
Yeah.
Others can go to that place. Others can go to that bar. Others can go to that. There's even places like in public. Others can go there.
Yeah.
I won't.
I won't.
Not because I'm an issue and not because they're an issue. I just realize with who God's called me to be and my reputation, I'm going to live above reproach. And what people mock the Billy Graham rule, but you can't mock the results.
Yes.
The results
Absolutely.
are that guy lived till, 90 something years old with not one scandal when it came to the opposite sex, when it comes to sex.
Yes.
So you can mock it all you want and you go, well, that's legalistic and that's demeaning to women. He ended well.
Yes.
And what I refuse to do is be another casualty. We use the Chutes and Ladders illustration. Y'all know the Chutes and Ladders. It's the game growing up. And, it's...
You might have to, which for some of our listeners, Google it. It's a game. It's a board game.
I know. I've taught this before, and I'm like, people are like, we don't even know what this game is. What's a board game?
Yeah. Charcuterie board.
Charcuterie board. There it is. Chutes and Ladders is it's like 1 to 100 spaces, and they have different ladders that if you land on that, but just you roll the dice and okay, if it's a 4, you go over 4 spaces. If there's a ladder there, you can jump ahead to the next thing. So you're going from 1 to 100, 100 you win. Okay. And I think that's life. 100 is your calling. 100 is your ultimate destiny in life. And there's ladders along the way. There's things you didn't deserve, but you got them. You were in the right place, the right time. God ordained your steps. You got blessed. And I've had so many ladders in my life. I've had those moments where God promoted me that I didn't deserve it. The book is a ladder.
Yeah.
I didn't push it. I didn't make it happen. God made it happen. But there's also the chutes along the way. The chutes are the slides that bring people back down.
Yep.
Some of them bring them down a little bit. Others bring them down. There's one chute I remember. It's like on number 88, and it brings you down to like number 15 or something.
Yeah, it's a free fall.
Crazy. It's a free fall all the way down. That is what a moral failure is. That's what a lack of integrity is. So guard. We said it this way. Old school Pentecostal church would have said it this way: guard the cracks in your armor, because that's where the sword's going to come in. Yeah. That's where the arrow's going to attack.
Yes.
It's the cracks in the armor that are there, and they're there.
Yes.
So just understand that those cracks are what's going to take you down. Because if it hits you in the chest, you're protected. But if you know where those cracks are, and that's what the enemy is. The enemy is so smart, because the way he attacks Bobby is going to be the way different than the way he attacks him.
Yeah.
Because he knows us. So you got to guard that. I want to give some hope for people though.
Yes.
That are that their integrity is lost. First of all, your goal when you're in an issue where your integrity has been messed up. And by the way, integrity is a great unfair advantage because so few have it. I've called my friends after some of these moral failures, and I go, I think that we're going to take over the world if we just don't do anything stupid. Like, we'll win if we just don't do anything stupid.
Good.
Like, if I've just am determined to never sleep with anybody else in the world other than my wife, I think for some reason my life will end well. Like, so it sounds stupid, but the reality is integrity will set you apart. But if you've messed up your integrity, and you've messed up and you're at the low of the low and you're listening to this, here's the result. The result is that restoration is possible. But I'll tell you, it happens in 3 levels. Your first restoration needs to be in your spirit. And you need to restore that relationship with God first. Everybody needs to be restored in their spirit first, because a break in your character and your integrity always started with a break in relationship with God. One common denominator amongst everybody who fell morally in the 80s and the 90s when they did research is they all stopped their personal time with God.
Wow.
So it's a break in your spirit. The second is there needs to be restoration in your soul. There's a reason for you to go outside of your marriage and confide in somebody else. There's something missing in your soul.
Wow.
For you to go and register on an OnlyFans site and watch some stuff that you shouldn't watch, there's a soul issue there. So you need to restore your soul. That's where counseling comes into place. That's where real therapy comes into place. You need your soul restored. And then the third level of restoration is a restoration in your service, in the sense of, now let me be restored to actually being productive in the kingdom of God. Don't get these out of order, because if you start it with, how do I get back into a place of importance or a place of significance, you'll miss it. It starts with your spirit, then it moves with your soul, and then it'll end with your service.
That's
Get
good.
it in the right order.
I love that. Well, as we end, as you've listened to this, regardless of where you're at, hopefully, it puts the fear of God in all of us to live right, to live well, to live with integrity. However, if you have some stuff and you don't have anyone to talk to, find someone, reach out to us. Don't isolate. The enemy would love to have you isolated and doubting and kind of stuck. And so, before it gets worse, reach out and let us know how we can be praying with you, how we can be partnering with you to those three things that Pastor Aaron just referenced. So again, thank you for listening. I know today was a little bit more of a deep dive, and but what I want you to hear is that there's hope, and that this is one of those foundational things. Don't miss this. Don't look at all the glitz and glamour at the expense of integrity. Have integrity and let God promote you. Thank you again for listening. Make sure and subscribe. Make sure and share. Thank you for being a part of this community.